All right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Threatside podcast. Today, I am here with deliriusz. Introduce yourself, though.
Hello, it's your co-host Delirious.
And we are joined by a special guest today by the name of Thurm, who is the CEO of the Guardian Audit firm. Please introduce
How's it
yourself.
going, guys? Glad to be here. Thanks for having me on, guys. It's a pleasure. Looking forward to discussing some of these exciting exploits as of late with you guys.
Amazing. So for the audience that don't know about you and Guardian Audit itself, what do you do and how long have you been doing it for?
Yeah, we do smart contract security. We do security reviews. That's exactly what we specialize in. We don't do anything else. We don't do Web2 pen testing or anything like this. We've just been specializing in iterating on the smart contract security review model and just getting it to be, as efficient, as effective, as devastatingly effective at uncovering vulnerabilities as it possibly can. And that's what we do. And we work with some of the most targeted DeFi companies in the industry.
That's amazing, yeah. I've seen on Twitter that you've had great success with the GMX audits.
Yes. Yeah, thus far, I think it's been, it's been probably over 6 months now since GMX V2 launched, which is kind of crazy. It feels like it was yesterday. But yeah, super successful product. Really great to see, how great the launch was and how smooth it's been. There's been no issues whatsoever with the V2 launch. So yeah, really great to see.
It was very nice. Cool. So, Del, do you have any questions?
No, go ahead.
Cool. So I have a question for you, Owen. If you were to have to do everything all over again in the Web3 security space, what would you approach differently?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know exactly what I would do. So I guess I'll explain how we did approach it, and then I'll maybe go at it differently. So when we first got started around 2.5 years ago, we just got straight into private audits, and we did that through what little network we had in the space. But I think and especially at the time, since contests were just sort of getting popularized, we could have definitely, jump started our journey if we just got straight into contests and started, really grinding those, trying to get high placements. But we never ended up doing it. We always just had I want to do a contest, but, then we get some big project coming in, we're like, oh, can't do it now. But hopefully we'll be able to get the team in and do some contests as a team. I think that would be really cool and very fun. But yeah, I think contests would be probably the number one way to just, get some breath out of the gate and show people what you're made of. And then, I think it can really kick you off and get the ball rolling from there.
Yeah, I feel like it works as very nice evidence of a person's credibility from a hacker standpoint, research area. It's something that can really make you excel in your career, just due to the evidence that's present on the bug bounty platforms. So that's something that I definitely agree with. Yeah, it's also why I don't tend to talk a lot personally on security stuff unless I have a very nice track record of it. This also applies to any topic. I feel like credibility is very important. So again, yeah, I definitely agree with your point there.
Yeah, absolutely. And otherwise, I feel like it just takes a lot longer of building up a track record of really excellent private reports and stuff like this, and building up the connections and getting the referrals and stuff like this. Otherwise, you could just advertise yourself by just really being excellent in contests, right? If you could do that. And to be honest, ideally you are capable of doing that before you're doing private contests.
Yes.
Audits and stuff like this, yeah.
Yeah, because otherwise, how would you know if the person is really good in it?
Well, even for yourself, what if you I don't know if I'm good.
Yeah, but your achievements speaks for themselves. And I also had a chance of seeing your insane work ethic. You are working really hard, really long hours. You're working weekends, for fuck's sake.
Of course.
Yeah. This is definitely, I haven't spotted, such insane work ethic for in the space. So yeah, super cool. And
yeah, I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, fair enough.
Sorry.
No, but I think, to be honest, it almost seems kind of normalized in Web3, especially in security. I feel like we've got, a number of people like obviously Pashov, but I mean, there's way more people they've got way more stuff that they're juggling than I am. Like, I won't, call anybody out, but people have like whole families, and some people are doing like full-time jobs, and they're still, running like their own security, like small security firm. So yeah, absolutely crazy work ethic, I think, just throughout the space. So yeah, I mean, everybody's just raising the bar across the board.
Exactly. I would say the competition aspect of this space is super high, especially because there are quite a lot of teenagers in this space who are really putting a lot of hours.
Yeah.
So it kind of sets precedence for the other players to, kind of align with the specific hours as well, if you want to stay at the top or even match their type of work ethic. It's something that you just have to destine yourself for, really.
Yeah, dude. Shout out, Chris.
Yeah, exactly.
17 years old.
Absolutely crazy.
One of the best guardians, man.
Oh yeah. So yeah. But so the thing is that you can be the best in the space, but for example, if you are spending an hour a day and your opponent is like spending 12 hours a day, there is the gap that you cannot fill with just expertise.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and I'd say especially for those who are earlier on in their journey and like you want to get to that point, even more so, you've got to put in even more time than the guy who's already ahead of you, because for every hour that guy spends looking at a code base, he gets more out of that hour than you do. So you've got to make up for that. And the only way that you really can is through just brute force effort and time, right? So yeah, I think that's really how you've got to go about it, unfortunately.
So the people that will be most hardworking will be on the top, like not taking into consideration the marketers. We all know there is this rather like loud theme of marketers and people not really being sure of their real abilities.
As stuff will work itself out over time. Like the nature of this space is that if protocols are getting hacked after you audit them, that will become evident over time. I think it's good to have, I mean, I even have some ideas on this. It'd be interesting to discuss with you guys, but I think it's good to have people calling out those firms when they do a bad job, and then obviously pointing out like, hey, this protocol just got hacked that you guys audited, and like this was something that you absolutely should have caught. But I think it would be interesting, and it is probably very much needed, to have some sort of an entity that would be somewhat governing the firms, or just holding them accountable to some standard, whatever that would look like. Maybe it could even be like a DAO that firms like pay into for a yearly membership, whatever, to be part of the certification. But I do think that that's a necessary piece that's missing, some kind of standard that folks who are, providing security assurance actually have to stand for, right? But I think that's something that there's very large potential for in hopefully the next coming years.
Yeah, like right now we do have like Wild West concerning security. Yeah. I think the problem is that the people who are paying for everything are requiring you to have some company that is known, and what companies are most known.
Yeah,
like you either can afford like OpenZeppelin, Spearbit, or you are going for example, Certic, which is, we all know that it's not the best option. I would say that it's better to pay like two less known but talented security researchers to do your audit instead of paying for one Certic audit.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Owen, do you have any ideas how can we ensure the quality of service?
Yeah, I think we have to define, obviously we can't, it's hard to measure security in general, right? There's no way to definitively say whether or not there's a bug in the code base, obviously. We wish there was, but there can't be. So I think we have to get more stringent on the inputs that are generally correlated with security. So we've got to say, for example, let's say we had 1,000-line code base. There's a measurable number of inputs of like, here's how many auditor weeks were put into this code, and then depending on the complexity, the size of the code base, there might be an appropriate number there that generally should be like, hey, probably shouldn't put in less than like a day on a 1,000-line code base for an auditor, right? Or maybe everything has to have a certain like code coverage, obviously, that's a very easily measurable one. Mutation testing coverage is another great one that, might be a little bit more accurate to the problem of shipping code that doesn't have bugs. And variance, all these things are very measurable. They're the inputs that ultimately cause a certain degree of security. But I think that's the side of things where if we had any hopes of having a standardized like bar to get over and start to require firms and maybe even protocols to adhere to, that's where it'd have to start, is on the side of the inputs.
I agree with that. It should be inherently embedded into the framework.
Yeah.
Super interesting view on that. So this reminds me of like traditional architectural design, for example, that you have the specific rules that you have to obey to. And of course, the accidents happen. But if you have well-defined set of rules and standards, they're just less common.
Yeah, it's just like with everything. Like I mean, every day, how many like airplanes fly across the world with like, dozens of people in them, and you almost never hear about them crashing. Like, yeah, I guess like once every 7 years, one goes missing.
Yeah,
we don't know where it was. So like that's so rare for the sheer volume of flights that occur, like literally all over the world all the time. And it's because they have systems and they have processes in place. And sure, maybe that's a bit removed from what we're doing in terms of how deterministically solvable it is. But I think there's still something we can learn, because you don't just take off an airplane without checking stuff like 6 times and going through a list of things that all need to be, checked off and have all this prepared before we actually take off.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. And, going back to the topic of the Web3 traditional Web3 companies that we have right now, which have some hiccups recently. We see shift in the space that, for example, solo researchers are teaming up or are building their own brand and are taking talented researchers from the space. I think that this is similar approach that you're doing in Audit, right? Yeah. So what do you think?
Yeah.
So what do you think? What will be the space of security look like, and especially concerning the traditional Web3 companies that are on the market right now?
Yeah, so I think very much I agree. I think there's theme of folks trying to start to team up and work together to provide even more robust security solutions. I think in the past, I've certainly been in the camp of like, hey, security solutions don't scale, or at least manual analysis security solutions don't scale. And of course, that's because of what we've seen with a lot of the big names of, maybe they have good quality to start, because, that there's got to be a reason to actually, get a name that's as big as they eventually have. But then as they scale up, the quality gets diluted. So I guess, just having that, all of those data points and not really seeing somebody who's done it successful. Yes, I think, I used to think it was just not possible to scale security solutions, but actually, I think it's possible. I think it's just extremely hard. And we just haven't hit the right combination of incentives and, structuring and putting the systems in place to see it actually happen at scale. But I think that, first of all, like the first key reason why we haven't seen it at scale yet is getting the incentives right. So I think a lot of the folks that, are the big names in the place right now, if you think about what the review is, it's, maybe 2, maybe 3 security engineers who are just full-time salary. They looking at your code base, they're not the founders. They don't have equity in the firm. So the incentives are, of course you want to do a great job as a security researcher and everything like this, but it's not the same incentives as if you're literally a founder and it's your name on the line, it's your company, you're out there in public, almost life or death. Like this needs to not be hacked. Like I can't tell you how many times I've gone back and basically just re-audited stuff. I feel like every weekend I probably re-audit GMX v2. Like, so,
really?
Yeah. So it's continuous coverage, but so I think the incentives they just get perturbed as you try to scale up and just use like the normal vanilla, like here's, your full-time salary, you're going to do these engagements. I think it kind of gets lost in that. And, that's a lot of the work that we've been doing with the 2-team model that we've been sort of iterating on for the past half a year or so, where, you have 2 independent teams of auditors who are working, they're doing their own independent review as like a normal collaborative team, but then they're competing against the other team. So there's a little bit of an incentive for some additional monetary rewards on top, depending on how many critical highs you find, if they're like unique findings, stuff like this, to keep people honest, but also to give them a feedback loop to see, oh, this was actually found by this team, but then this team didn't find it. Why did that happen? So obviously there's a feedback loop for the individual auditor on one of those teams to be like, oh, this is where I need to improve individually. But also as an organization, we want to be able to see, what kind of findings was one team finding that the other team isn't? How can we consistently solve that so that both teams will always find it, right? So that we can always find a reentrancy vulnerability. Reentrancy vulnerability should always be found by both teams. Underflow vulnerability should always be found by both teams. If it's like a casting underflow or like an underflow DLS or something like this, right? There's certain classes of bugs that you could probably build really effective systems for that would solve this, right? So, there's a number of things that we're working on to be able to ultimately just get the right model, get the right systems in place, the right incentives to be able to actually scale this. And I think we've come a great deal so far, but I think, obviously it's just a game of 1,000 tiny iterations until we get the perfect process down. And, we've been able to scale to a decent degree. We're still, a pretty small team of about 10 people, but hopefully we'll be able to bring that even further in the future and keep the quality. I think that's one thing I'll say is as we've added people and they've started to do more reviews, our quality has only gotten better and better and better, which is something I'm really proud of. And some of the reviews that we're doing right now, I think they're really going to blow our past reviews out of the water. So really excited about that.
Super nice. And I really love the idea because on the one hand, competitive audits give you this quick feedback loop. What you missed, what can you do better? However, if you are doing private audits, how do you know what you missed? Like, you don't know, and you don't know if you are improved. Yeah, until you are on Rec News, and then you'll know.
Oh, let's not miss that.
Yeah, but this approach is super cool. So you have the best of two worlds. Like, maybe not the best. Like, some people really love doing the competitive audits, but let's face it, they're like really intense. Like, they're usually way shorter than normal private audits, and they can be really draining. But you have like the immediate feedback loop on, and you improve. However, on private audits, you have more time. You have can like really audit it better. However, how do you know if you are improving? And having these two teams, adversary teams that are playing against each other is super cool idea, because I think that it's the best of two worlds.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. Like, I think. I mean, also that's an interesting point on the contests. They have a lot of like short-lived contests. Do you know why that is? I don't understand why they can't just be longer, right?
Yeah, me neither. Like, definitely it plays well for the people that are doing only that. But there are many people that maybe would be super great just if they had more time. Like,
yeah.
There are people like me that are 30 years old, have, wives, kids, and day jobs, and they would love to do that, but they don't have like 8 hours a day on it. And additional factor, what you said, given the short time span of those, like, I don't know, I do also think that it will benefit the projects. I mean, like, more bugs would be found. Like, on the other hand, if it gives incentive to the best ones, to earn more money. So the more I will grind, the more money I will have, especially if there are like some more than one juicy contest at the same time. Like, people who spend like 12 hours a day on it, like, really shine. So maybe this is the incentive here. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's very much like winner take all in the contests. And I mean, for good reason. Like, obviously, if you don't contribute any interesting findings, then you shouldn't be remunerated. So I think it is like really capital efficient that way. But yeah, I guess if you did make the contest longer, I do think that more deeper vulnerabilities would be found. Like, I think the more complex ones take that time to understand the code base, and then you have to spend maybe a week or so away from the code thinking about stuff, which might be a blind spot when you have a very short period of time. But I could see it probably like clogging up the contest flow. Like,
yeah,
I could see like say that. There's like 20 contests going on in parallel right now, so
exactly
it'd probably be even worse. Yeah,
it's quite interesting. It would be a very good way to tackle the contest, because you would be able to see find more complex findings, and that would benefit the actual project way more. But again, it does create probably a big backlog for a platform like Coderino or Sherlock. So yeah, that's kind of a sad limitation that's happening. I do have a question for you though, Owen. This you might actually can talk from this from experience for your auditing firm. But do you think professional auditing firms that grow and scale actually lose quality on other end of the spectrum, or do you believe they remain the same or rather improve? I guess you could say, with some firms like Certic, they scaled quite massively, and I would probably say there was a quality loss in their work, as opposed to when they were more minimal. I also remember that you said that you saw great success in that, your quality improved. Do you think that this applies generically to all auditing firms, or not?
Yeah, I think it's all about the model that you scale, and like what we found as we've started to add more people and do more reviews, is the reason we've been able to improve is because we've been carefully measuring and adding in new things and iterating on the model to be able to first of all, just standardize the process and build like the right automations and stuff to make things more efficient as we scale, and give us some hope for some economics of scale when we do eventually get larger, but also add in new things like, of course, the invariant testing side and building out the standards for fuzzing. And we're actually going to be building out our own like dedicated internal fuzzing team, which is exciting. Because actually what we found on that has been that, hey, the fuzzing timeline is not at all the same as the manual analysis timeline. There's very much like a hard cost to building a fuzzing invariant suite. So really it doesn't make sense to have a fuzzing engineer on the same team as one of the manual analysis auditors. So instead of having them directly on one of those two teams, we're actually, pulling them off and having just a completely dedicated fuzzing team that's just for the engagement. So stuff like that, that's just like going through, trying new things, seeing like, hey, this is not really working here, or this could just be way more efficient, or also just being on the ground yourself, doing the reviews just gives you a completely different perspective than, some of these firms might have, where the CEO is maybe not like technically an auditor actually doing these things. Maybe they don't see everything that a hands-on auditor would see. So I think it's all about making those adjustments and measuring and putting the right incentives in place, right? Like we discussed, like, I think, yes, if you want to make the most scalable, like infinitely scalable audit firm, yes, I would just hire full-time security engineers. And I would just put them on engagements. So I put like 2 or 3 of them on an engagement, and then projects would come to us and we would be able to take them on immediately. We wouldn't have to like spend a few months hiring out for a new like set of 2 teams to be able to handle another audit in parallel, right? So there's a trade-off with like rate of scale, I think, and like quality of scale. So I think that we will not achieve any kind of ridiculous scale in a short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
We can achieve it in a long period of time as we slowly build up to it, and we keep the standard of security researchers that we take on at Guardian at just a world-class level. That's going to take a lot longer than it is if we had 30 projects come to us tomorrow and we just wanted to hire, like, we're just trying to get anybody and scale as fast as we can, which I think is probably what happens with these larger firms that reach a really great scale, and they do pretty quickly. And I mean, the incentives to do that are kind of perverse, right? Mm-hmm. Because you can make a ton of money doing that. But you kind of have to have the restraint to not do that and think long term. And I think in 5 years it will be the right choice for Guardian. But yeah, that's my long-winded take on that.
That's a very good response. I actually love that. I also definitely like your thinking process for the long term is definitely more beneficial. And I do believe a lot more audits and firms should always look at the long term picture rather than the small term, and just maybe focus on money solely without realizing that they're doing a lot of trade-offs for no reason, ultimately.
100%. And I think the funny part is you would probably make more money in the long term just by doing that, by way of having something that's actually exitable with a great brand and a great model. So yeah, definitely agree.
Yeah, I'm just thinking now, the traditional Web3 security companies, they are having, constant team of people that are doing audits for them, and they have problems with scaling that. But because, they're hiring the totally new people, and sometimes, you have to be prepared for both bull market and bear market. But I think to myself right now, what if those teams would have the same screening process for independent security researchers. And then when the demand grows, just, hire a bunch of them, have some manager that would, work with them to make sure that the quality is the same or better. And you have way more flexible in this way than having just a team of people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you definitely could have, like, I think really the past year, I could understand why in, maybe 2-3 years ago, it was exceedingly hard to scale these services because, like, there just wasn't really a community for it, or at least, not as large of one that is today. But I think, yeah, there's definitely merit to that in terms of being able to scale up or down with independent security researchers.
Yeah. Okay. I'm creating my company. Cool. So concerning the security researchers, so you've been in this space for a long time, and you are also doing exceptional work of educating and sharing knowledge with others. In your view, what is the thing that the aspiring security researchers are lacking?
That's a great question. I think if you're just coming in to the security game and you're probably feeling like you're hitting your head against the wall, and I think the number one thing that you would be lacking, that maybe you think it's this, that you need to study DeFi math or whatever that means. It's really just algebra. But you might be thinking it's this or this or this. I think the number one thing that you're lacking is just seeing what it looks like. So having that experience of just one time performing well in a contest. Once you do that first time and you know what it looks like and you know that you're capable of it, that's the number one thing that you'll be able to do it again, and you'll have that confidence. I think the confidence is the number one thing, is because that feeds the ability to believe that there are bugs in a code base. And if you truly do believe that they're in the code base, then you're going to be thinking about it all the time. You're going to be coming up with all these different edge cases because you're convinced that they actually exist. And I think that the hardest part for the people that are just starting out is they haven't seen it, they haven't experienced it firsthand to, be like, wow, this code base is like really broken fundamentally. But what you do, then you become extremely skeptical of every new code base. And I think that really is what it comes down to at the end of the day. Of course, there's the technical know-how and stuff like this, but I feel like that's more deterministically achievable. You can go and you can read the resources, you can take the courses, but once you just see it happen for the first time, then I think you're over the hump, and you can go downhill from there.
Yeah, like you can read all the books in the world about riding, a car, driving a car, but until you try it yourself, like you won't make it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would definitely agree that there's probably a very big mindset problem with people, like you're saying, with the security researchers, because if your perspective of a code base is, it's too complex, I can't understand it, I don't think there are any bugs, then that's going to become a reality. You won't actually find it. And if it's the opposite, then, you actually pique your own interest. You'll be digging into every single thing within the code base. And next thing you know, you found like 5 bugs within like the first 3 hours, for instance. So yeah, I do feel like mindset plays a very big role in this. People definitely underestimate that kind of aspect when it comes to auditing.
No, 100%. It is really just a mind game. Like, so much of it is a mind game. Like, if I'm looking at a code base and I don't want there to be bugs, I want the audit to be over, or we're at like the 4th week of the audit, and I'm like, man, let's just get this thing over. I could miss anything in that week.
Exactly.
Having with that mentality. So it's all about forcing yourself to reframe that, and that this is even, something that I continue to deal with, is like, how do I always make my mind want to find the bugs, right? Or actually want to believe that there's more bugs. And that's a lot of where a model comes in, with the two teams wanting to be better than their team, right? Wanting to find more criticals. And I'll also say one interesting thing that we've started to do is we share how many criticals, highs, and mediums each team has found. So if I'm on a team and I know that the other team has 3 criticals and 2 highs, and I'll have 2 criticals and 1 high, then I'm looking at that code base completely differently. I've never scoured code harder than when I know that there's one critical vulnerability that somehow inexplicably the other team has. And it just totally changes the way you look at the code base. So I think that's a really great ancillary effect of having this new model.
Cool. This is the pure alpha. Yeah, people are talking, like about the tools that you need, like what is reentrancy, about, all these kinds of attacks. But those are just your alphabet that you are using, in this language of security research. And definitely the mindset, as you said, is the biggest one. Because if you look at it, on the broad level, on the source of all the vulnerabilities, like it doesn't matter if it's reentrancy or some price manipulation. It's just introducing some unexpected state, and using it as a leverage to do something that protocol didn't anticipate.
Yeah, 100% every time. Gets them every time.
Cool.
So I do have another question for you, Owen. In your opinion, what are the most challenging problems facing the crypto security industry today? Do you think there are any at all? Or what's your overall opinion on that?
Yeah, excellent question. I mean, I guess that's really the question. I think going back to the idea of having some standard that audit firms and ideally even protocols have to adhere to get some widely accepted like certification or something, whatever this would look like. I think that's one thing that would be a huge step, because I think probably the biggest problem that we have as an industry is not any uniform requirements. It's like you said, it's the Wild West. I think that's the perfect way to describe it. And that is, it's showing. There's, it's showing in the number of TVL hacked. It's showing in the reputation that the industry has. I don't tell people I work in crypto. I'd say I work in cybersecurity. And if they ask, I say, oh, we do like blockchain projects, cybersecurity. But yeah, I think that's really just a symptom of this non-conformity in, there's no clear security standards. And if there's no clear security standards, then how can we have ubiquitous security throughout the ecosystem? So I think that would be probably the number one lever to pull to solve the security problem.
Do you ever think that if a company, for instance, did have a certificate which, other auditing firms kind of obeyed to, do you think it ever opens up the door to corruption? For instance, like auditing firms having that certificate when they shouldn't have it, but because, the area is very lucrative, right? Even there's always been some sort of stuff going on between auditors, cheating on contests. So I feel like this is actually a very fair kind of question. Do you ever think it could open up the door to corruption?
100%.
Yeah,
100%. I mean, this, it's not an easy thing to solve. It's not an easy thing to just, speak into action. It would have to be very carefully thought out. I think I'm not a huge fan of DAOs for, actual, for-profit companies.
Yeah,
but there might be an opportunity for some kind of a DAO here, which might be interesting. There might be an interesting way to set that up. But yeah, the incentives would have to be thoroughly thought through. And I think there might even be some kind of decentralized feature to this that could make things make sense. But I think that's, it's certainly a possibility. And I wouldn't be surprised if that did become an issue, if there was something like that. But I think we should at least try to tackle it. And, as things like that would come up along the way, then they can be addressed. But I think certainly anything would be better than nothing, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a very fair point.
Okay, I have last question, and I want to play the devil's advocate here. What do you think? Why is DeFi the traditional finance but worse?
Yeah, so I think, let's see, what were we? Okay, yeah, so I think that DeFi and TradFi, they're not necessarily better or worse than each other. They just have different, like if it's like a skill tree, right? DeFi has way better like trustlessness and like time to finality and stuff like this. TradFi has, you can take a loan out without putting over collateralized assets, right? A lot more capital efficiency in many cases. So I think ultimately we'll marry the two and hopefully have some sort of combination where you can have the fast time to finality and you can have the at least aspects of the trustlessness, but hopefully ideally ultimately married with the capital efficiency and things like this. But ideally we don't bring in a lot of the downsides of the centralization, the opaqueness and stuff like this. But there's an opportunity for the right teams to build that solution and garner $1 trillion of TVL. But I think none is distinctly better than the other. I think that a combination of both is probably what will end up changing the world.
Cool. This is super insightful. Yeah, something like traditional finance operating on blockchain, maybe.
Yeah, they've started to do this. Actually, I got really interested a few months ago with what JP Morgan is doing with Onyx, and it's actually extremely bullish for the security industry, I think. And it's become a part of our core vision at Guardian is to enable these institutions, enable other entrepreneurs and other teams who want to come in and build these solutions. Because I think what they're calling it is institutional DeFi, which is an interesting term. But they've actually put out reports and stuff like this. So I'd be happy to share the one that I found. But I think they made like a fork of Aave or something, and they put it on Polygon, and they're doing some foreign exchange. But they actually got it audited by some unnamed third-party entity. I don't know which firm it would be or what, but like JP Morgan is buying smart contract audits out here. So it's exciting.
Okay, like to be honest, I have heard that JP Morgan is doing something in blockchain, but I didn't know that they are so advanced in it.
Yeah, I think they have like a branch called Onyx, which is like dedicated to their institutional DeFi research.
Do you feel like those traditional, banks, let's say hedge funds, any of the big companies, do you feel like they can really gain a very big dominance over the current players in the crypto market? And would you say that's kind of unfair or fair? Or, what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I would say they probably wouldn't even be competing for the same opportunities. Right. I think like the stuff that's being built now is very much probably not at all what they would be building. I think they would, and they have a lot of obviously different like requirements that they have to abide by, and they go in depth on how they built out their entire like certification standard or whatever for, you've got to be correctly KYC'd and all this stuff that I wouldn't pretend to know anything about. But yeah, whatever they would be building, I think it would be, they wouldn't even come in and compete with everybody who's building now. They would just go over it and take their trillions of dollars of assets under management and just put it through that new tech stack. I think the biggest value proposition for them, at least as I understand it, is the efficiency, time to finality, being able to make transactions with any counterparty across the world. Like that's a very clear, obvious improvement over how things function now. I mean, mind you, I'm not very well versed in the traditional finance system. For that, you'd have to talk to my co-founder, Dan, who over years in like the banking world. But yeah, I think that's probably the biggest improvement. Obviously, you get other things like composability, being able to like program your own literal use case for tokenized assets. I think that's going to enable a lot of things. The composability is huge, but yeah, and I think they'll sort of build it into their existing solutions and come up with not necessarily like completely new things, but sort of just revamped infrastructure. The consumers might not even see anything change, but it will just slowly, silently all be on a blockchain, whether that's a private blockchain or public blockchain, I don't know. But yeah, that's what I see.
The potential for cryptocurrencies as a whole, the whole market is so huge. It's actually quite crazy when you think about it, and just how early it really is in terms of its adoption. So many more opportunities can brew out of this. For instance, RAWAs, right? Real world assets. That's like another huge thing that will be connected with cryptos. Obviously, the potential is just unmatched.
100%. And yeah, I agree with you. I think the market is just so much bigger than we think it is. And every day I'm like surprised of like, oh, here's this new protocol I've literally never heard about. And they have like 200,000 followers on Twitter.
Cool.
And yeah, I read like this, oh, here's this new security company I've never heard about. And they're huge, right? like, so yeah, I'm constantly every day reminded how much bigger the market is than just what's right in front of my face on Twitter, right? So yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think for how big it is now, sure, exactly. It could be so much bigger. And yeah, the real world assets potential use case is all the money on earth, right? Potential. So it's a great TAM. I guess it will just, it's all about obviously the execution, and we'll see who ultimately does pull it off and find the use case that actually does make sense, right? We don't want to just put it on chain so people can just trade it with perpetuals or something like that, right? Put it on chain for like a reason that actually gives a veritable improvement over what's already existing. And I think that's probably what a lot of the big players will be looking to do.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that. Like super insightful ideas you presented here. And maybe we'll go now through some of the interesting topics from February. So the first one is $6.5 million was stolen from Seneca protocol. Like the vulnerability itself is rather basic. It's like they are having something like router-like contract, which just allows you to perform multiple actions at once. And of course, users have to approve this router contract to do anything with that. And like 90% of users, they are having unlimited approvals. And the router contract allows you to perform any action. One of the actions might be, for example, transferring all the funds that the user approved to yourself. So that was the attack. But I think that this is not the biggest thing here, because the most insane story here, like we are on 2024, I thought that we are way past, such a dumb vulnerabilities. And the thing is that the guys were having competitive audit in Sherlock, and they just drop it in the middle of the contest, and people already found like multiple vulnerabilities there. and still they decided to launch. And the most insane part here is that people were telling them, were reaching on their Discord that, listen up, you have critical vulnerability, you will get wrecked. And they just, kicked out all of the people that were saying that. For example, I know that Daniel von Farge was also mentioning that, and they also kicked him out. And then, of course, they get wrecked. So the story is unbelievable, given that we think that we are, not so early in the space, but we are, late early adopters, and the projects, should know a bit better than like 2018. Yeah. What do you think about it, guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to the core issue, like who's holding these projects accountable, right? Like they're putting the stamp of DeFi and crypto on their projects, whether we like it or not, whether they choose to or not. And the worst players will ultimately rise to the top of the newsfeed, right? So it's not a great look. We need to be able to somehow hold people accountable for this, for the rest of the industry. But also, is it a fork of Abracadabra money, like their Cauldron contract?
Yeah, it is.
Is that why it got canceled? Because they didn't have the rights to be able to use that or something?
I think something like that did get mentioned on Twitter.
Yeah.
Pretty sure. Yes. But then they probably also had the assumption that that's why it's probably safe to deploy. Because Abracadabra was audited quite a few times now, right? It's absolutely crazy though, cancelling the contest just midway when it's guaranteed that a lot of security researchers found at least one bug. It's like a decision that was made with no thought at all. With all due respect to them, I mean, you've got a lot of users using the protocol, right? You're putting them at stake for your own error. That should not be happening at all. I feel like sadly a lot of other projects will learn this the hard way as well. But yeah, it's very sad to see, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, it's even, unfortunately, it's kind of funny. I think there's literally a comment in Abracadabra code that's like pointing out like, hey, you should not, this contract should not have any approvals or any funds in it, or you should blacklist the token from the callable address list. But yeah, I think at some point it's on, like, if we can't hold the protocol accountable, at least the users, you've got to do some homework on like who's launching this, because I mean, was there even a single technical person on that team? Like, was it just ChatGPT? Like,
that's the big question.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have personal story here because I also this was my first Sherlock contest that I wanted to participate in, really. It got just cancelled in the middle, but I already found multiple issues there. And I raised the concern on Twitter, and one of the projects reached out to me and they wanted to integrate with Seneca. And I said, I won't tell you the exact vulnerabilities, of course, but please do not do that. And I just said, okay, they are a fork of Cauldron. Just see what the vulnerabilities this version of Cauldron had, because it had some node vulnerabilities. That's why they migrated to new version of Cauldron, and I hope the protocol didn't integrate with them after all.
Yeah, 100%.
I definitely agree with that. So there was also an article quite recently. It was published on February 8th by Protos. It was titled "Hackers Switching to Centralized Exchanges to Fund Crypto Attacks." Now, the whole kind of primitive of the article states that they have been using AI-generated fake IDs in order to pass KYC checks on certain platforms like OKEx. Owen, what do you think of this? Obviously, as crypto kind of adopts, a lot more people kind of enter it. There will be also a lot more Web2 criminals entering it. Someone has fake IDs, real IDs. They're quite easily accessible on the forums that are underground.
Yeah.
Do you feel like something like this will just continue to rise without the actual exchanges kind of creating any measures against it because of how technical it will be and, problematic, to the point where it can raise false errors on real events. What do you think of that? That might have been like a very long question. I do apologize. But yeah.
No. I think AI is exceptionally scary when it comes to Web2 security. In terms of Web3 security, you're only really afraid of AI if people use it to audit their code. But Web2 security is, it's exceptionally scary because, that's crazy to be able to generate fake IDs and have them actually like work with AI. That's scary, and that's a hard problem to solve. I think the Web2 security problem is going to become an increasing, like as we get to know more about the Web3 security problem and we build out the solutions for them, and we slowly scale up the force of security researchers through education and contest platforms and stuff like this, that problem is going to get, for the most part, solved. To figure out how to solve that. And I think that one it's a more well-defined problem. This is something that you can conduct formal verification on, like literally at the like proof level, we can define that problem. But Web2 security is, potentially unbounded, right? Because you don't even know what an AI could come up with and, throw at a system. So I think that problem will become increasingly more of a focus for, the DeFi industry. Over what time frame? Probably, it's going to take us a number of years more to really get a handle on the Web3 security side of things and get that down. But I think I do see us transitioning to allocate more resources, more mind share to the Web2 security side of things. And that is something in the future that we also want to get into ourselves at Guardian is to be offering the Web2 security side of things for protocols, for their front ends and their keepers and stuff like this. But I think it is, in short, I think it's a problem that is definitely going to need more and more mind share, especially with AI.
Yes, I agree. What do you think of the overall privacy of Ethereum? Let's say you're transacting, you're utilizing services, such as Tornado Cash, right? They get a lot of heat because criminals utilize them. But you can have totally, sensible use cases for it, right? You just want to stay anonymous. There's nothing wrong with that. Do you feel like in crypto throughout the next few years, we're going to have even bigger problems in respect of privacy in terms of how it will get undermined? Because the main argument will be how it, funds terrorism, enables criminals to get, complete anonymity. Do you think this is something that's going to be a very big problem?
I think it definitely brings a conflict of interest for, ultimately, I think we're right at that point where we're starting to enter the regulation era, and we're starting to have those conversations, and institutions are starting to move in. So it is really going to become a point of conversation. Of course, it already has been, but even more so. I don't know how that gets resolved. There's not really a straightforward way to resolve it.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that certainly with the big players, if they do bring adoption in, they're going to want some backdoor somehow, like
I agree.
Apple device, you got to know there's something that they can get into any, or they even say in like Tor, there's a backend door in Tor, but Ethereum might be the last, or these protocols like Railgun, all this stuff, they might be the last actually anonymous tools out there. So they're not going to like it. They don't. But we'll see. We'll see how that gets resolved. I think either it's kind of like the unstoppable force meets the immovable object, right? So I don't know. I've got my popcorn ready. I don't know how it will turn, but we'll see.
I feel like a big benefit to us auditors is that we can see the contract code, right? So if there are any backdoors, it's like they can get publicly shamed on Twitter anyway. I feel like that's a very big advantage from a decentralization point of view. You won't like the community can effectively stop the growth of something that's backdoored. So it's quite beautiful in that aspect. Ultimately give no chance for a corrupt organization or anything like that to have a backdoor in and just effectively scam people, lie to the community. So I feel like that's actually pretty good for us. But for people who aren't educated on auditing, I guess that will be quite problematic. And it's also quite hard to get that point across, just to the public,
Yeah, I always find it funny when there's like some threads of like, non-technical talking about like, in this contract they can transfer ownership. I can definitely see that perspective, but there'll have to be some hopefully trustworthy resource to refer to on that front. Maybe that ties into the standardization across the space. But yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Okay, cool. Moving on, 2 topics in one. Like first, we had the Blueberry hack. The hack was due to the wrong price oracle, like decimals in price oracle. So the oracle returned all prices as 18 decimals. However, there were tokens that had different decimals. For example, Wrap Bitcoin, Blueberry USDC, and Blueberry OM, which all had 8 decimal precision, and the attacker just put 1 ether and got back insane amount of other tokens. But the interesting thing here was that the MEV bot front run this hack and returned 367 ETH back. So this is super cool, and it's not the first time that we hear about MEV bots being white hats. And this is super cool because we have generalized bots which like don't know what they are doing, but they're doing good stuff. So I think that it might move in some directions of companies building MEV bots just for that, for front running attacks, and it will be constant fight. Like I don't know what about the flash bots, because still you can hide, at least on Ethereum. What are your thoughts on that, Owen?
Yeah, I think this is a huge opportunity. I wish I knew more about MEV. I know practically nothing about it. Otherwise, I would try to start making this myself. But yeah, I think there are some solutions out there. I think BlockSec team has their own like just-in-time security solution that's really exciting, which is basically like MEV for these kind of last, hopefully you can save and exploit. I might be wrong about that, but yeah, I think it's super exciting, and I think just like given that these generalized bots are able to do it, you could build a specific one that's probably even more effective. You could even build it for a specific protocol and have it, maybe there's a function that it calls that only it's allowed to call or something like this to like save the protocol. Of course, hopefully without introducing additional security risks. But I think it's definitely promising. And if there's just an additional layer of security that we could add, that's a huge win. Because, for the longest time, it's just been, you get your code audited, maybe that's a contest, maybe it's a firm, a combination of those, and then you have a bug bounty, and then if somebody hacks you, you offer them 10%. And that's basically the pipeline, right? So if there's some additional layer we can add there, I think that's a huge one. And I mean, it's already happening with just MEV bots. So
yeah.
Like fail fast and recover slow. This is the Web3 security mantra. Um, okay. Cool.
Oh, and I do actually have a quick question. What do you think of rewarding the white hats with a TVL for a bug bounty? I did actually make a post on Twitter about this around 3 months ago, maybe longer. I ultimately argued that it's impossible to offer any sort of percentage of the TVL because it's the actual mindset of the hacker that's the problem. It's also why you see so many attacks in Web2, right, and effectively Web3. Ultimately, it's a problem that, in my opinion, you can't fix with the black hats because they'll always, it's kind of like an ego problem, right? Flexing and whatnot. You can flex in communities, right? Like, oh yeah, I stole 500 million, it's like no amount of the TVL can actually help. But I'm curious on what your view is on that. Do you think it's the opposite, or what do you think?
No, I would definitely agree with you. I think the people who are black hats, they're going to have their protocol, they're going to hack it anyways. And I think following from that, even more so, it's probably worse to standardize on, okay, after you hack it, we'll give you 10%, because then there's probably a fraction of white hats that will then go like, oh man, well, I don't want to argue with them over the bounty and stuff like this. I know they're not going to do that well. So if I know that there's a decent chance that, it happens every time that I hack it, and then they'll say like, oh, you got 3 days, and if you return it, you can keep 10%. And there's probably a good amount of white hats who are looking at that and thinking that's a better deal than like spending 2 weeks arguing with them over the bounty and getting basically nothing. So, that's something that's got to be fixed. We do not want to rely on people's good faith, right? We need to align the incentives correctly so that things get resolved peacefully. They get resolved without, causing a bad name for the industry. And not that it doesn't have to be like this, right? So maybe there's some solution. I know ImmuneFi and I think Hexens, they're launching a new bug bounty platform. All the players, they're tackling that problem, and I think there's probably a better way to solve it than how it's being solved right now. Probably some sort of trustless solution there. But I don't think the incentive is right, and it's probably doing more harm than good.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's a great question. These are things we've got to be asking ourselves.
Yeah, and on the topic of Web2, because of course Web3 is connected tightly to Web2 if we want it or not. Tornado Cash had another malicious proposal passed, but this time the proposal concerned the Web2 part of Tornado Cash, which is the website based on IPFS. And the problem here was that the new malicious JavaScript code stole all the private information about the deposits. And the thing is that you have to keep this information private, because this is the part that only you know, and in order to withdraw the money from there, you need to know that. If someone other know that, you have problem, because this is like the private key to your funds on Tornado Cash. And again, the topic of decentralized governance, we see that it is super problematic. At first, when the protocol launches, it's super cool. Because everyone is, goes completely bananas over the project. But as the time passes, people just, lose interest. And we saw that, painfully in case of Tornado Cash, who really verifies the correctness of the code of decentralized protocols?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's another case of the incentives are not aligned, right? They're not there. Especially, you buy the governance token at one price and then the whole product tanks, right? And then you just walk away with your bags. I think that's probably another opportunity for a new sector of Web3 security that I think we're starting to see come about, is the governance reviews and stuff like this. It's also just another example of why I don't think DAOs are necessarily the best way to operate any kind of, well, I mean, in Tornado Cash's instance, it's kind of a special case, but any kind of business operations, I don't think it's the most effective solution. But yeah.
Yeah, like the one that aped the tokens early has the biggest say in the protocol.
All right, so another topic as well, play Dapp exploit. It was a 290 million heist. That's quite a big number. Very sad as well that it occurred, because from what I remember, what I saw on Twitter, I think you actually shared this, Owen. The hacks have been going down, right, in terms of trend.
Mm-hmm.
So it was looking quite nicely until I saw the hack for 290 million.
Yep.
It's quite sad, but security overall is getting better because there is less hacks compared to 2023 so far.
Yeah.
So that's very good. It shows that we're doing a good job. But ultimately, this hack here was due to a private key exploit of a wallet of the contract deployer. And ultimately, the unauthorized person, could add a wallet and then enable minting for the token of the project. So the hacker actually minted around 200 million tokens, which were valued at 36.5 million, and that represented 72% of the total supply, which is quite crazy. Private key exploits, I've been seeing kind of more of them occur. They never really used to be a trend, but now they're just popping out.
Yeah.
Do you guys think that this will just continue to rise, or because some of them were actually from a Web2 standpoint, right? It's quite interesting how they're just kind of becoming a trend. It's almost like a new attack vector now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, attackers are going to have to get more creative as we prove out some of the smart contract security processes. And then I think the vast majority of, at least the largest attack surface, will be the Web2 security front and the operational security. And I think that, that problem has been mostly solved in the Web2 app world and in the InfoSec world. But in terms of private key management and stuff like that, there's definitely a big opportunity to expand there and first of all, just correctly educate teams on how to manage this, and then also potentially some kind of service to make sure that this is all correctly managed and we don't see this stuff structurized, because I think you're right. A lot of the attacks now are not even necessarily on-chain exploits, or just hiccups, right, or misconfiguration. For example, the Blueberry one with the Oracle decimals, just not necessarily a hard smart contract reentry, but more like a misconfiguration misstep that might be out of the scope of just a checkpoint security review or kind of ongoing updates and stuff like this, and just the operational deploying and stuff like this. But yeah, I think we'll definitely begin to move more in this direction, and I think starting to take a more holistic approach to protocol security from the moment you start planning your architecture to the moment you launch, and continuing into updates and stuff like this, and operational, just day-to-day things that you can do to improve your InfoSec resilience and your security posture. My favorite term, but yeah. So I think it will necessitate a more holistic approach, and that is something that we want to move into over the long term. But personally, we're just focused in smart contract security right now.
Amazing response. Really like that.
Yeah, the last topic for today is miner CX. The loss was that big. It was not big, 500,000. So I would love to have 500,000, for a single day of work. I mean, this exploit, but in the world of Web3 security, 500,000 is basically nothing. The worst part here is that the vulnerability was so easy. I think that even Ethernet has something like that. I remember that on one of the Certora workshops I was into, like we did just that. If you have balances of user and you are caching that in the middle, then probably you have problem, because what if you are sending from the address and sending it to the same address? So if you are caching the amount, you can double that. And this is what happened here. And the issue is so basic that it's really hard to believe that it was missed. Like, of course, there are some, hard vulnerabilities that are, like, for example, Kyber hack. It was super in-depth, super hard to find out. But this is, hard to believe, that the protocol fell for, just simple stuff like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think this is in the bucket of things that could easily be avoided with the right systems and like just the right approach. Like, this doesn't even take an extremely skilled security researcher to come up with some crazy exploit. It doesn't take fuzzing. Mm-hmm. There's really just, a distinct like set of steps. Like, hey, we need to check for these kind of like logical issues. Yeah.
Yeah, and the worst part is, like, you already have whole fuzzing campaigns for ERC20. Just copy paste, modify a bit, to fit into your project, and you're golden, and you will not have, all those issues. But it really requires just few hours of work. Yeah, so I don't know why people are not using that.
Yeah, and I will say that's one of the reasons I really do love fuzzing is, sure, you can easily uncover that with, manual analysis and potentially some kind of systemized process for those kind of vulnerabilities. But fuzzing is great because not only will you always catch those, you'll also catch oftentimes the crazy ones that would require you to sit down and listen to binaural beats and just think about weird rounding errors for hours, right? Or just think about some calling dysfunctional over here on this contract and having it cause this little minute thing to happen over here. That makes that whole process, it removes the luck. I think a good amount of those vulnerabilities, there's a luck aspect where you just have to think about the right edge case at the right time. You could be looking at the right line of code. And fuzzing just abstracts that all the way, and it's very deterministic of, if you write this invariant, you will find this counterexample. Granted, you give it enough runs and you have, good clamping on the inputs and stuff like this. But that's one of the reasons we really love fuzzing. It's infallible based on the invariance that you give it. So if you have good invariants, then it will be infallible at uncovering issues with those invariants. Granted, it's not formal verification, so the the space which it actually tests, stuff like that. But you don't have to get lucky. That's the main thing.
Yeah, if the vulnerability portrays itself every, 1 in a million, we would find it every few minutes, right? With fuzzing.
Yeah, which is really something when you think about vulnerabilities that have a very small detection chance by manual analysis, especially if you do concentrated liquidity protocol or something like this. But yeah.
Very, very good. Very good points.
Owen, any last words?
It's been a pleasure, guys. I think really insightful stuff that we discussed. I mean, I haven't even fully thought through a lot of the ideas that we discussed today, so I appreciate you guys discussing them with me. A lot of interesting takeaways. But yeah, guys, I appreciate you guys having me on.
It's been an amazing conversation with you, Owen. Really appreciate you for coming on here and voicing your thoughts to our questions.
Likewise, guys.
Okay. Take care. God.
Bye.